We heard in this morning's panel about the future air transportation system. We know that the future system will be more complex, more diverse, and have more demands placed upon it. At the same time, we expect the future system to be more efficient, predictable, and able to handle that increased demand. That increased demand is not just greater demand from the scheduled airlines. We are also building a future for general aviation. Today, the United States has a robust general aviation community. In our country, general aviation spans everything from amateur-built and light sport aircraft to the fastest and most efficient corporate aircraft. On many of our runways, the aircraft queuing up for takeoff include Piper Cubs, Gulfstream 5s, Cessna 140s, Citation 10s, as well as a host of Boeing and Airbus airplanes. General aviation has always been driven by a can-do spirit, and we continue to see innovation today in new technologies and applications emerging in GA that have real potential for broader use throughout the industry. That can-do attitude is also spreading to new business models, some more successful than others in this challenging economic times. But it is times like these that help foster innovations. We will surely see more changes as manufacturers, operators, repair stations, training centers, and more adapt and adjust. Yet our bottom line, so to speak, comes down to a common denominator, and that, of course, is safety. We have a distinguished panel with us today. Ed Boland from the National Business Aviation Association, Peter Bunz from the General Aviation Manufacturers Association, Emilio Matsuo, Executive Vice President, Engineering, Embraer, and Liu Yajun, Director General, Office of Aviation Safety. So let me begin with Ed and ask you the first question, and then if each of you could take turns at it. What is the one or perhaps two top success attributes that you see as being key from the general aviation perspective so that this part of the industry can continue to be a vibrant and innovative part of our future air transportation system? Ed?
Well, I guess the foundation, I think, of safety would be the partnership between industry and the regulators working toward a common goal, and that common goal is clearly safety. When I look at the progress that we have been making over the past several years and have really arrived at a remarkable level of safety for general aviation, there is a tremendous amount of cooperation and teamwork on not just understanding the causes of accidents, but moving beyond that and sharing data through corporate FOQA and other programs where we're beginning to understand trends. I also think that some of the work that we have done to promote industry best practices has been enormously helpful. NBAA works closely with the International Business Aviation Council on the International Standards for Business Aircraft Operations, or ISBAO. I think that the best practices that are inherent in that discipline have been enormously helpful. So I think it's really a case where we try to understand accidents, we try to make sure that we have appropriate interventions, and then the information that we have is well distributed. And I think that there are a number of programs where we worked with the FAA and NTSB to get that information out, and I'd like to see those continue.
Thank you, Ed.
Just to dig a little deeper into what Ed was talking about, one of the things that we work very closely with our regulators, whether they're the FAA or EASA, are being able to get technology out to the operators in a very quick fashion. And I think the situational awareness that we've been able to deliver to operators across the spectrum of general aviation is one of the reasons why we're seeing such great success with the safety record. When you take a pilot or a couple of pilots that are flying an aircraft and have great awareness of what the weather is ahead of them, around them, at their destination, and they actually have a picture that is better than what a controller has or better than, in a lot of cases, what commercial airlines have, that is a tremendous safety enhancer. When you put terrain avoidance warning systems on aircraft, or just a handheld device that people have, whether it's an electronic flight bag or in our light GA aircraft, just a handheld that gives them position orientation, constant awareness of where they are, whether it's on the runway environment or whether it's in the air and where the high terrain is a tremendous enhancer to safety. And having the manufacturers, the operators, and the regulators working together to get this technology into the hands of the users as quickly as possible, I think is a tremendous boon for safety.
Thank you, Peter. Emilio?
Okay, I agree that the top issue is safety. And other point that I'll mention is training. Of course, the technical capability of the airplane is key point, and you have already mentioned. We have to complement with a good and customized or complete training process. We need also to have a good productivity of this aviation also. Meaning productivity is a quick trip, meaning go straight or go directly to the destination I want to go and go when I desire to go. This is, again, I think productivity is another important issue in this aviation. And at last, I think the cost, the operating cost is also very important in this segment. It's a very cost-sensitive segment.
Thank you.
Okay, my view is that the policy to promote the development in the future air transportations for general aviation, I think that we need a policy, because in China we have seen that when we talk about the development of GA, so it should be departed with two wings. So left wing could be transportation, air transportation. The other wing could be the general aviation. So we cannot depart it with one wing. So to further develop the general aviation, I think the policy from the government, from the regulator, is very important.
Thank you. Recognizing that, of course, this is an international forum, we banty about the term general aviation, and we know what it means to us, but I'm not certain that everyone in the room may have a clear understanding of what general aviation really means and what is that segment of aviation. It's easy to say that it's anything other than commercial, but I would offer to you that at least in our form of aviation regulations, one could operate a 747 for personal use, and that would be considered a general aviation airplane, much like some of NBAA members who operate Boeing 737s, the BBJ. That one time, not too long ago, it was strictly in commercial operations, but it's not the size of the aircraft that determines whether it's GA or not. It is what that airplane is being used for. So, Ed, and all of you, would you like to add to that comment, please? Your thoughts on this?
Well, I think you've largely hit it, Nick, and that is the idea that general aviation is described as all aviation other than scheduled commercial airline or the military. But it's not about the type of aircraft. It's about the kind of operation. Is it operating on a schedule? Is it for compensation or hire? I think the easiest way to understand that, and Nick talked about a 747, and we all think of that as a commercial airplane. But here in the United States, when it happens to be operated by the Air Force for a certain person who lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, it becomes Air Force One. It is a military aircraft. That's the way we look at airplanes in the United States. We look at its operation. And if it is a private operation, then the airplane, whether it's a Piper Cub or a 737, is a general aviation aircraft. If it is used for scheduled airline service, it becomes a commercial aircraft. And so it's simply not the aircraft, it is the type of operation. And the thing that sometimes can be challenging for people to understand in the United States is that on some flights, it can be operated commercially. On other flights, the same airplane can be operated private. So it can be a little challenging for people who want to look at an airplane and saying, what is the category of airplane? It's actually the use of the airplane that determines whether it is scheduled commercial airline, military, or general aviation.
And what we're seeing in Europe right now is that Europe is recognizing, and EASA is recognizing through recent communications they put out on general aviation, that there's a very important factor that's involved in this called proportionality. Just as Ed was saying, how the aircraft is used is very important, and regulation that you have for the commercial sector, for the air carriers, doesn't necessarily fit well for the general aviation population. It may produce such a costly burden that it stymies the growth of general aviation and ergo economic development or use of that aircraft to go and further commerce within the EU per se or with Russia or other countries. So it's very important that this concept of proportionality be applied, that general aviation is a different cat than commercial aviation, and that it needs to be looked at in a different lens with perhaps some different regulatory standards imposed upon it.
Thank you, Peter. Emilio?
Yeah, I think this is the big challenge, I think, Nick. Having, from agricultural application to executive, on airplanes, we have a Embraer 135, right, in regional, and we have the legacy. And now we'll have the Lineage 1000 on the same platform of 190, and with different operational requirements. And for us, it is also, for the OEMs, is a big challenge to have this dedicated focus for each business unit. And this is very, very, very challenging for us. And I believe, and it's true, that in order to monitor this general aviation with this variety of operation is huge, huge challenge.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Nick raises a good point with definition of general aviation. And I recall that in 1995, and some colleague asked me the definition or the classification of the difference between GA and the commercial flights. And when I asked some colleagues from ICAO, that I got a correct answer that GA is not classified based on the size of the air fleet. It should be classified based on the features of the operations. So, from my understanding, our challenges for deal with the oversight of a GA is that some industry, some airline, and they have both functions, both operations, general aviation and the Part 135 operations. I think that is difficult for the regulator to do your daily oversight. Thank you.
Thank you. We in the FAA, in tracking the general aviation community in terms of what segment, in other words, what breaking down of that segment of the community, where are the accidents occurring and how can we address those very precisely? So let's talk for a minute about the safety record. And I'll start with commercial aviation because we certainly track that. And you heard throughout the course of the day that, and let me just address the global safety record, and that is per 100 million flights, it's a rate of 1.0, which is an outstanding and remarkable record. In the United States, I'll translate it into something that is very understandable. Since August of 2006, where we had the last commercial fatal accident involving one of our smaller carriers, a regional carrier, and where 49 people perished, since that time, 1.6 billion people have been transported by the United States air transportation system. To put it in perspective, that is the equivalent of having transported the population of the United States at least 5 times without a scratch on any passenger. That is huge. Let me turn for a moment to general aviation. The best way in our business to measure whether what we are doing has the intended effect or is having the intended effect is to look at it over time, because it is difficult for us to measure the non-event. That's obvious. But over can, the absence of those events would imply that the actions that we are taking are in fact having the intended outcome. So as excellent as the accident rate record is in commercial aviation, it's as good, although the numbers are a little bit different, in the general aviation side. I would tell you that in the corporate side of GA, it is excellent. It is equivalent to what we see in commercial operations. And I'll describe those as basically the turbojets, the Citations, the Falcons, et cetera. And then we break it down further with pleasure aircraft, amateur-built aircraft, recreational flying, and business and corporate. So we break it down that way, and I'll turn to Ed, and maybe you can describe, since I know you are now embracing not only what we would call the typical classic corporate departments in terms of the type of equipment they operate, but also you're beginning to embrace, or have embraced for some time, the light airplane community and having the same kind of events annually with them. And just your perspective on that.
I think safety is a combination of a variety of factors. I think one of the more well-known training companies says the best safety device on any airplane is a well-trained pilot. And I think certainly the intense focus that companies put on training for their pilots, for their aviation departments, is fundamental to the safety of business aviation in the United States. And Nick certainly touched upon that record. I think it's also has to do with some of the equipment, and Pete talked a little bit earlier about some of the advances that we've made in aviation, in avionics, that, you know, the situational awareness that the pilots can have in general aviation aircraft is as good, better in many cases than the scheduled airline. So you've got well-trained pilots, you've got advanced technologies, and then I think beyond that it gets to standards of operation and the crew practices where there is an intense focus on that as well. I think all of these are kind of legs to a stool. I think that they all come together, and what we have seen is that, as Nick said, they are making a difference when you look at the general aviation safety rates over the past several years.
Thank you. Peter?
Well, Nick, I would say, though, the one thing that it is having somewhat of a chilling effect that I worry about is the criminalization of aviation accidents. And obviously, we all as an industry need to be concerned about this, because if there is more and more threat put on those of us that are involved, whether it's operators or manufacturers, in the criminal element of this versus being able to do proper data analysis after an accident has occurred, then we are not going to move forward as fast as we could in aviation safety. Also, we all know the safest aviation environment is when nobody flies. So if we make it too expensive to comply with a lot of safety mandates out there, then we'll have the effect of reducing the accident rate because not as many people will fly. And why I bring that up is that we do have some concerns that there's a capability in modern aircraft out there today, because of the digital nature of how all the avionics work together, even in the light general aviation environment, to get information off the data buses that can be provided to safety investigators to be able to do a very good analysis. But if we are required to put a very, very expensive hardened flight data recorder on the aircraft, we're going to defeat the purpose. And what we need is organizations like the National Transportation Safety Board and their equivalents in other countries to be able to think out of the box, to be able to look at the problem and say they can still be in charge of all the data that comes off, but to work with the manufacturers to be able to know how to extract the proper data, because each aircraft is different, and be able to use that not only as a tool to be able to investigate an accident, but also to know how we can be more predictive in nature. And that's one of the things that I think Nick has really been a champion for here in the U.S. and with the FAA, is being able to take data and become predictive and proactive with it. And we are just at the point now where we can really start to extract great data on not only how many hours are on an aircraft, but how those hours have impacted the aircraft. How much turbulence did that aircraft fly through? How many cycles were put on the power plant? Those are very, very important bits of data that we need to get out, whether we're analyzing an accident or we're trying to prevent one ahead of time. And so I think we can do a much better job in that area.
Thank you, Peter. Emilio.
Well, I think in the past, the complete integrated avionics system would cost, what, $1 million, right? And for big airplanes, it represented 3% of the cost. Today, I think we have a good integrated systems in a range of 100,000, or maybe 128,000. It's becoming affordable, but there is a lot of room to have better price on this package in order to work toward more safe airplane. Of course, 100,000 still represents about 9–10% of the small airplanes, and it is still very expensive. So I think we have to still push against the industry in order to have more affordable integrated system. I think this is would be very important. And the other point is related to the information that you are able to gather from the operation. From this general aviation, it's I don't know if it's the same for all nations, but it's very difficult even to find how many hours they're flying per year. So it is very, very difficult to gather information. When you have an accident, you know, the level of detail that you can gather is very, very low detail that you can get from the accident. So it sometimes does not help in order to prevent next problems in the future. So this is still a lot of room to develop and in order to achieve a good standard, I guess.
Thank you. Liu?
Okay. Although we think that the safety of general aviation cannot compare with the commercial aircraft, but we have to work closely from the point of the regulator to implement the correct policy to emphasize the regulations for general aviation and to do more training to improve the safety. Of course, to add some new technologies for GA aircraft. And I think FAA has done a lot improving GA aviation and GA safety. Last year, I spent a couple of days in Alaska. I realized they're really a great achievement improving that. And I think the international community should work closely in the future, improving the GA safety. Thanks.
Thank you. So in light of this conversation around safety, What actions can we be taking to continue to assure high levels of safety in the general aviation community through this economic downturn?
Well, I think I think we continue to do what is working, and we continue to make sure people understand why it's important. I talked about some of the partnerships that exist within the community and the regulators. Programs like the Bombardier Safety Stand Down, where Nick, you and I've had an opportunity to participate for a number of years, where we essentially take 3 days and talk to the community about the various challenges and the various ideas. I think the challenge then becomes, how do you take that opportunity, which may be open to 400, 600 people, make that something that's available beyond that. And we've certainly had our outreach efforts by both the FAA and industry, and I think, you know, that that's very important. But understand, you know, I think your question starts with the premise, gee, they're challenging economic times. Maybe people will cut back. Maybe they'll cut back in the area of safety. And I think that misinterprets kind of a community commitment to safety within the general aviation field. When there are safety events in general aviation, they're enormously well attended. That information is absorbed by the community because the community understands how important safe operations are. They recognize that whether it is a company, whether it is a family, safety has got to be first. Safety has got to be inherent in everything we do. And it's really been a hallmark, part of the culture of aviation. And so do challenging economic times put our culture, essentially our DNA on the line? I'm not sure it does, but I think it forces us to make sure we don't take it for granted. We know it's something that we have to work on in good economic times and in bad, and keep the focus there.
I would agree. Peter?
I think as you look at, I agree totally with Ed, that if you have a good basis for safety in your safety management system, protocols that anybody has established, whether you're a personal aviator or you fly for business in general aviation, the important thing is to evaluate proficiency of the pilots. Those that are pilots know that if they don't fly as much as they used to fly, there is no substitute for being in the air and actually having to do it. You can go and do simulator training, but awareness that if you're not flying as much as you should be flying, that you have to take extra precautions and follow the checklist to the letter all the time, not rely on the memory as much. There's things that we do there, and also recognition that if the aircraft's not being flown as frequently as it used to be, we all know it's just like a horse. You got to exercise a horse. If you don't run fluids through an aircraft and you don't use an aircraft, it's going to break more often. So at least starting aircraft up, running and exercising the systems, whether it doesn't fly or not, is just smart practice to make sure that if we're not flying as much as we should be, that we are still exercising the pilots and exercising the equipment to a level that when we do take it in the air, it's safe.
Thank you, Peter. And Emilio, in Brazil?
I think that regarding the regulation, I think for the general aviation, I follow the King Smith work in working on the regulations, certification regulation. This is, or for me, for OEM, is the starting point, right, for the product. And they're making a very good job in rewriting the regulations in order to reflect the new technologies that is coming for these light airplanes. And it's a great job. And this is the minimum we have to use, so the regulations and the compliance to the regulation. This is the minimum we have to follow. But FAA has also other initiatives that are, I think, very important, like the committees. You have one is the CAST, C-A-T-S,
that's right.
Right? And there was another group working on the structures that they involving OEMs, authorities, and operators. in order to give guidelines to inspection and also for design. And I think this group is active for 18 years and given a very, very good result. So there is not only the regulation, but this kind of things could be transferred to general aviation. Of course, general aviation is very cost sensitive, as I have mentioned, but I think there is a room to have something that as a process similar to the commercial aviation.
Thank you. Liu?
Okay, from the perspectives of the public, they didn't care about the economic situation. No matter economic good or not, they are focusing on the safety level of general aviation. Okay.
Thank you. So continuing with the theme of safety, we've been very successful and certainly have much, much more work to be done in the arena of sharing information, working together. We're well developed along the lines on a continuum of continuous improvement with the air carrier world, where they have formal programs where they can report events that occur, and they have a guarantee that unless it was deliberate or intentional, they will not be punished. So that is a powerful data stream of information that comes to the FAA, and together working with industry, we're able to identify precursors and address those precursors and prevent events from becoming accidents. So the challenge that we face is, one of the programs that we have is the ASAP program, the Aviation Safety Action Program. It's where flight crew members can report that which they see in the system. And there are guidelines on how to do that. It is very, very effective. The other is a more objective reporting of what's going on the airplane, and that is the focus process, the focus system. But that exists with established carriers and formal organizations. It's a little more difficult to bring together. You can do it with a large corporate departments where they have a capability to do it. I'll ask you gentlemen to address how can we reach that community that is an individual owner of an aircraft, who is a member of an association, but doesn't have a system. And yet, Peter, you began to touch on what is coming about in terms of some of our recent production aircraft, the VLJs, where they have been able to telemetrically download what is happening with the airplane to the manufacturer and immediately know what is going on with that aircraft. What would you suggest we can do together, industry and government, working together to bring into that fold of information sharing that segment of the GA community that is not your GM corporate departments or those large corporate departments? How do we do that?
Well, I think that fundamental to these programs being a success is there has to be an element of trust, and this trust has taken some time to build within the commercial ranks. It's beginning in the general aviation community, primarily with business aviation operations. But I think there has to be a confidence in the trends that are being reported and a culture that develops around that. I think from a technology standpoint, Pete's already talked about it, you've touched on it, Nick, we're beginning to see the parameters be pretty well established. We can begin to capture the information. But the challenge in general aviation is, unlike the carriers where you have a single company and 300, 400, 500 airplanes operating into and out of maybe 30 airports, in the general aviation community, you have 600,000 pilots, you have over 200,000 airplanes. None of them are operating on a schedule. They're going into and out of 5,000 airports in the United States. It is a very, very diverse community. The types of repetition that you see at a given airport may be much lower. So it's a bigger challenge. But I think it's a challenge that is worth taking, and I think it begins with developing strong trust that we can have that dialogue between the regulator and the operator about what information are we giving, how will it be used, and then how will it come back and benefit the community as a whole in the term of safety.
Thank you.
I think when you look at the global nature of this industry, I think you can point to, in the general aviation safety world, what EASA and the FAA are doing to work together to have representatives from each one of those regulating bodies with industry working on the general aviation safety committees that are going, and to expand that to be more global in nature, to find out exactly what kind of data we want to be able to capture, because we know that a data-driven approach is going to improve safety. There's no two ways about it. We've proved that. So now it's having the same terms of reference, having the same ability for not only the regulators but also the safety investigators to be able to say, okay, what kind of data do we want to be able to have, and have common terms of reference across the globe will do a lot to help us figure out exactly how we can best optimize the data that is already available out there to be more predictive in nature.
Well, I think we can have a lot of data, but what we need is information from the data. And in order to have a data, as I have mentioned, the present technology is getting much more affordable. There is a lot of airplanes that is derived from big other platforms. You have a pure executive airplane. So I think technology-wise, we are in the point that we can start gathering more information from the general aviation, and but it must be as the operators are spread all over the world. We need to have a very, let's say, user-friendly system, a very agile process, so that people really have patience, let's say, to send all the information we need in order to create this information from the data, and from this information, all the indicators, all the way to monitor the operation. So I think we're getting there. We need to have this process and a way to gather those informations.
Thank you. Leo, any comments?
Okay, I think data sharing or information sharing of general aviation is as important as commercial operations. But we all recognize it's difficult to do that, at least presently. But nevertheless, it should be encouraged. It should be done. My opinion that we can do this by having association, or by having a community, a local community to do that. We can share the information through the internet. Maybe the colleagues here do not know that although the general aviation in China are not so big, but we do have some association. They organize themselves. They can have some forum. Although it is small, they can share the information. They can some people interested to do that and to share the information, to collect the information. Thanks.
Thank you. SMS is certainly the buzzword in the community. I would like to offer a point of view, and it is one person's point of view, that it is a name for a process. It is about hazard identification, mitigation, etc. No matter what you call it, that's the essence of it. It's risk identification and risk mitigation. NBAA has been very proactive in addressing SMS, and you basically have given it a different handle, ISBEO, but the essence of it is the same. Can you talk a little bit about that, ISBEO?
Well, as I mentioned ISBEO in some of my in my opening remarks. This is a international standard for business aircraft operations. It was developed by the International Business Aviation Council, and it has been around for approximately 4 years now. And just exactly what you said, Nick. The idea is that you try to have standardized processes, and it is by following those standardized processes that you begin to identify anomalies and trends that are essentially the precursors. They provide the information that allows you to recognize when something is developing and to be able to determine whether or not to exercise an intervention. I think one of the things that a lot of people misunderstand about SMS, about ISBEO, is when they hear the systems and identifying and all of that, it starts to sound big, it starts to sound cumbersome, it starts to sound like it may just be too much trouble. We have not found that with ISBEO. One of the early ISBEO operators that we saw was a company that had 2 pilots, a single airplane. It took them about 3 or 4 months to go through the ISBEO process, and it's working for them. And so I think that the important thing to understand is that the processes can work regardless of the size. They are scalable concepts, and I think that's something that's often missed.
Great, thank you. Peter, any thoughts about your membership?
Well, I think that we find that working both with the folks in the certification directorate that work for you and over with our friends at EASA, that in the manufacturing processes, the programs that we have put in place for delegation authority, we have a very good, strong safety partnership going between the regulator and the manufacturers to be able to employ SMS principles to that process as we certify these aircraft. And I think even though the names sound different, we are applying those exact same processes, and as we bring them forward to the regulators, they see very well how they fit into the SMS framework, and I think it's going very well.
Thank you. Emilio?
Yeah, I think last year, right, we had discussed a lot about SMS, and I put as my goal this year to start implementing internally, and we are in the middle of this implementation. We started with the prototype operations side, prototype and pre-series airplanes operations, and we have to evaluate compared to the existing process we are applying, but it's we are moving toward making it applicable for us.
Right. Yeah. So you're a manufacturer of turbojet airplanes, and aside from the regional type of airframes that you manufacture, you're introducing some very advanced technology that brings tremendous capability to the flight crew. Can you explain to the crowd here what benefits are derived from, say, having an integrated avionics package and et cetera?
Well, basically, you can have automation, a lot of automation. For example, for the Phenom 100, we are certifying for single pilot operations. And so we have developed and we have discussed a lot about man-machine interface, human factors, and a lot automation, so that the workload for the pilot is so that you have a very good safe level And a lot of, let's say, the lessons learned from the regional, from all the application we had on all the line of products. It was very important for us, not only for technological point of view, but also for training. Training had a very good legacy from past experience on the regional and commercial business aviation. And for example, for the Phenom 100, we have a complete program, training program, with the availability of full flight simulator for Phenom 100. That is great. I mean, it's very, very good.
Thank you. Leo?
Okay. As for SMS, I think SMS is recognized as a newly safety initiative or supplement to the safety oversight of regulators. But I got a confusion just recently. I heard two voices. One idea is that the efficiency of the regulator will be based on whether you have a national safety program. SMS is only limited to the industry. The other word is that SMS is a concept, it's a tool. It can be used both for the regulators and the airlines and the industry. My personal view is that I support that for the safety initiative, for the supplement to the safety oversight. The government, the regulators, in the future perhaps will implement and should implement the SMS, not only limited to the industry. I don't know whether I'm correct or not. Maybe some people can clarify this definition to me.
Well, you raise a very interesting point, and I will so continue with that thought that you raised. And I'll speak as a regulator. And this subject was touched on in one of the other panel earlier this morning. SMS is not just for the industry. It is also for the regulator. The regulator is very much a part of the safety equation. And one might ask, well, to what extent does the regulator play a role in the safety equation other than assuring that the industry complies with regulations? Well, we play a very significant role in that because we can unwittingly, through our behavior, contribute to accidents. So we have got to be introspective, look at ourselves, and see how we can continue to improve how we perform together with industry, and in essence assuring the best possible performance by government and industry delivering the safest system possible. So I absolutely agree with you. It is something that is more than a concept, and I agree that people might misunderstand that. I would suggest to you that we as an industry have been in the risk management business for many, many years. We've always been managing risk. We're getting better at evolving the safety equation and how we do it, evolving to a point where it becomes systems interfacing with systems so that there is complete, seamless, and integrated information sharing so that the total system benefits, including governments. So, but anyway, you know, we are into 1 hour of conversation here. I would like to take the opportunity to open the floor to questions, and if you'd like to come forward, not necessarily forward here, just someone will present you with the mic and we'll take the questions. So this gentleman here.
Thank you very much. Fascinating discussion. I appreciate the comments of all the panelists. My question is actually comes straight out of the program, which I see as a concern. And then I'd like to follow up the question with some observations that I think back that up and then ask for the panel's opinion. The question being, as it's outlined here, is how will increasing costs impact the future use of general aviation aircraft and our ability to attract and train new pilots, which I see as a huge dilemma. And it impacts the safety not only on general aviation, but I think on our entire industry into the future as we see light jets coming forward and next gen. A couple observations. I was fortunate enough to start a long career in military aviation via general aviation. I don't see that as a viable option as it was 30 years ago plus when I started flying, due to exactly what it says here, costs. I've witnessed around my area, my local area, I live probably, I'm in the approach pattern to a small private airport. That is, I see the activity over the last 3.5 years of light aircraft going down and down and down. I had the opportunity to meet with the director of my home state Department of Aviation a couple of weeks ago and talked with him about the intrusions on small airports from development, from housing coming in that affects both safety as well as the community then rebelling against the noise that comes from aircraft and driving, flying farther and farther away from where the people live and have access to airports. I see that, I think it was Mr. Bolin that you had mentioned about the attendance at safety meetings by general aviation, and I agree with you. I've been to 2 of our AOPA-sponsored and state-sponsored safety forums in the last 8 months. Tremendous attendance, but the average age in that audience, I bet 80 to 85% was my age or older. I don't see the youngsters coming in, which leads me to, again, how do you see the costs and what is our future? The other impact is in meetings with Next Gen Safety Group. The focus of the discussions is always on the aircraft that need 5,000 feet of runway or more, and not the smaller airports. Where is the voice of general aviation? Where are the new pilots going to come from given these changes in the industry? How do policymakers and regulators help, or industry help to train, attract, and make it affordable for young aviators to get in and keep our levels of safety as they are today? Thank you.
Would you like to try that, Peter or Ed? Either one.
I'll go ahead and start. A lot of issues were contained there. I think a lot of it relates to will we continue to have a future generation or generations of general aviation pilots, which are really the lifeblood, the foundation on which everything else follows. And I think that we recognize that that has been a significant challenge to our industry. Kind of the heyday came in World War II when we built a lot of airfields. A lot of people were trained in flying. A lot of people had a GI Bill and were able to use that. And then you had a lot of enthusiasts out there. And so everybody knew a uncle, a nephew, somebody who was passionate, shared that passion, and we saw that grow. The challenge is we haven't had that kind of infusion for half a century now. And I think the industry is recognizing that a huge part of its future depends on student starts, and student starts are going down. A few years ago, the industry came together with a program to address student starts. It was called the Be a Pilot program. It did a lot of commercial advertising on cable channels. It tried to use the internet a little bit, but we weren't really very sophisticated on that. More recently, AOPA has kind of taken over that endeavor, and we have a number of programs that are going on, whether it is the AOPA program, their pilot mentor program, the EAA Young Eagle program. But let me just throw out a couple thoughts on it. It is clear that there continues to be, within a large segment of the population, a desire, a passion to learn how to fly. All of our surveys suggest that that is something that continues to be out there. People think it takes too long, people think it costs too much money, people don't know how to access it, but inherent in a lot of people is a passion and a desire to learn how to fly, and I think the challenge for all of us is how do we cost effectively do that? Which means we've got to find a way to reach those people. We also have to make sure that the experience they have when they try to live their passion, live their dream, is something that makes sense. For a number of years, we had a challenge because they would come to the general aviation airport and they would get into old technology airplanes. Now we've seen with the advances in avionics, some of the new manufacturers and the companies that went back into production after the General Aviation Revitalization Act. I don't think it's the technologies as much, but we still have challenges in helping go out and attract. And those challenges are related to cost. There's no question that we saw this summer fuel prices going up, hours coming down. And it's not just cost, it's often the burdens. And that's what I hear a lot as someone who represents companies. They talk about the cost, but they also talk about administrative burden. What is the cost of the paperwork? That's part of the reason why the general aviation community was so vigorous in its opposition to user fees, because user fees represent, of course, the cost that comes on the invoice, but there's also a processing cost to that as well. Some of these challenges are very complex. Some cases, the challenges that we see on the horizon are every bit as great as the ones we're experiencing today. We've got environmental regulations, security regulations that all appear to be out there. We continue to have funding issues. I don't know that fuel is going to continue a downward trend. No one knows where that goes. But I think that the onus becomes on all of us in aviation to work at both national and local levels to try to address these challenges. And I don't think it's going to be a silver bullet. I think keeping each local airport open requires a vigilant community at that local airport. I think the Learn to Fly programs mean a lot about trying to inspire others through those of us who have the passion ourselves.
I would just add a couple things there. If you look at what is happening in education now, in each one of our countries, we're realizing the true value with the pace of technology in the world today of the value of math and science. And teachers that use aviation to be able to teach math and science is something that goes a tremendously long way. We have a program that we support as manufacturers called Build a Plane, and there was a professor in Kentucky that took a bunch of kids and started everything that he taught in all of the math and science courses was based on aviation. He's got these kids so fired up. They're building airplanes in their shop classes. They're going and taking lessons. I go down and I visit Emilio's company down in Brazil, and the aviation academy that Embraer sponsors down there is a model for the world. It gets these kids so fired up, and these are kids that are disadvantaged that get to go out and get fired up and get excited about aviation, and those are the kind of things that we need. And then we need to make, again, an entry level for these young people with such things like the light sport aircraft movement that we have here in the U.S., and we have a commensurate program over in Europe, and we see over in China as well. There's more capability to get younger people into aircraft that the operating costs are low, that training companies can go and buy a number of these aircraft at a relatively low cost compared to more advanced type of aircraft, and still they have tremendous capability in them. And we're very, very glad that the regulators are supporting us in this movement. We want to make sure that these aircraft are safe, but we as manufacturers, and my association as certified manufacturers, are very supportive of what the Experimental Aircraft Association has done here, and its commensurate organizations over in Europe to be able to try to support that movement as well.
Emilio?
I have a question. What's happening now is that we're going into the recreational airplanes. which are a class by themselves. Then we're going into the very light jets, which means that individuals, doctors, and business people and so forth are moving up right into the airline traffic. And on the other hand, we have a great expansion on the business aircraft, even though airliners may be dropping off right at the moment. Corporate airplanes are still selling pretty well. So we have all of these things now kind of going in a different direction. At one time we had, you bought a 172 and people flew to go somewhere. Now the recreational pilot is just going to go fly in the local area. He's not really qualified to go beyond that. I had a good opportunity to instruct on the Embraer 145 and 135, which is a great airplane. Incidentally, the most dangerous part about that airplane was to do the walk around, because you could bash your head as you walked around the airplane. And so the technology now on the jets with the systems that are built in, making these aircraft very, very safe. The biggest problem, what I see, is going to be jet upsets and people who are not overly qualified, who have maybe 200, 300, 400 hours in a light airplane. After they learn to fly, they transition to a jet. So I think we're going to see a lot of running out of fuel type of emergencies. We're going to see a lot of jet upsets. I had the good opportunity to go out to the National Test Pilot School, and we did a bunch of jet upsets and the technology, and I think that some of these people are going to have this training, whether it's in a simulator or some airplane, to get a good situational awareness. Otherwise, we could have a little problem. I don't know how you feel about that, but I see as the VLJs really take over the world, sell as many as everybody thinks they will sell, that we're going to have a situation that we're going to have to monitor closely in the general aviation section. How do you feel about that?
Well, let me take that question, and then I'll ask these gentlemen to address it as well. Your concern is a concern that we share with you. However, I am confident that we are addressing it in a most significant and very powerful way. We have been working with the small light jet aircraft manufacturers in developing what is known today as the FITS training program. It's FAA and industry training standards. We've moved away from what is the typical PTS, demonstrate an ILS, demonstrate stalls, all those things, to scenario-based training. And many of these manufacturers will not sell you the airplane unless you have successfully completed jet evaluation, and then after jet evaluation have successfully completed the training course for that particular make and model. There is also a partner playing with us in terms of insurance companies. Unless you have demonstrated that you have completely and satisfactorily completed the training course, you will not be insured. So we've taken the steps that we can to address that concern. And Peter, Ed, any other thoughts?
Well, I think it's very important to note, we had this controversy maybe a couple years ago about VLJs, and there were terms, they were going to darken the sky and mosquito Air Force and everything else. And my good friend Nick Sabatini testified in front of the United States Senate and basically said, we're going to introduce these aircraft in an orderly fashion, and that's exactly what happened. It's just another airplane. And in fact, if you look in the cockpit of a VLJ, it's a hell of a lot less complex than some of the twins that we have out there. You don't have to worry about the prop pitch. You don't have to worry about the mixture control. These are simple airplanes to fly. And that's hard to get across to a lot of people that don't understand flying, is that a VLJ is a natural progression. Now, very soon, we have the Phenom 100 coming on board. We got the Eclipse out there. We've got the Mustang, the Cessna Mustangs, and pretty soon we're going to have single-engine aircraft that are out there that are being introduced. And again, we are naturally going to see a progression to jet aircraft and the small turboprops out there as we keep technology progressing forward. But the important thing is we made these airplanes very simple to fly. And what we're seeing in the marketplace right now and how these aircraft are being flown, first of all, you got to have a type rating to be able to fly them. And what we're finding is the pilot qualifications of those that are flying them, most of these guys have an ATP already. The flight regimes that they're flying them in are very relatively short. They're generally less than 1,000 miles, and they generally climb up to the high 20s. They aren't up there at the 40,000 foot level. There's a few that can get up there, but mostly that's how they're being flown. And they're being introduced exactly as Nick predicted, in a very, very safe and orderly manner. And we're seeing the exact same thing in Europe. It is just another airplane.
Okay,
In fact, let me just add to that point. One of the greatest contributor to the reduction of commercial aviation fatal accidents has been the turbine engine. Introducing the turbine engine to GA is going to be a great boon for safety.
Okay, actually, what we have seen on the Phenom 100 customer, there is some pilots that is airline pilot that was retired. There is pilots coming from turboprop, coming from piston engine, general aviation, and we have a training program that the first thing we do is to evaluate the capability of the pilot, so that the training is individualized for each case, so that you have more intensive training sessions for those who came from the turboprop. So this is one important point. And the second is the technology itself that was already mentioned, the automation. You know, I fly a very small airplane, and the flight test people is inviting me to fly this airplane. Say, if you fly that airplane, you will fly this very much easily, you know. Because for small airplanes, if you have a very limited automation, then it's all manual, right? And if you go to a congested airport like São Paulo, I had a headache when I come back to São José dos Campos. And for the Phenom, said much easier. So I'll take a slot on the simulator, and then I'll try, you know, because they're telling it much easier. So. Yeah.
You?
Just one word. I estimate that very light jet will have a potential market in the future.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Well, I just will agree with a lot of the stuff that has been said. I think the industry has been very focused on this for a long time. I think the community has come together with advanced training guidelines. I think this is something that the insurance companies have been very, very involved in. The manufacturers all have mentor programs to help make sure that this is stepped through. I know one of the manufacturers went so far as to do upset training and bought special aircraft to make that as part of it. And I think what you are seeing is that very light jets are coming into the community in a safe and integrated manner, which is exactly what we have all worked so hard to achieve. And I think that we're realizing that.
Thank you. Mr. Matthews?
Microphone.
This is one of those cases where you can look at the accident data in several countries. I mean, I know I track the accidents pretty closely in about 6 countries. You can look at the data and you can really see the effect, the positive effect of the technology that's penetrating further and further into the system. I mean, you see fewer CFIT accidents in GA, you see fewer night accidents, all kinds of things. However, there are other accidents that have not been changing. Probably not surprisingly, because perhaps the technology hasn't penetrated into those fleets, like agricultural operations, herd mustering, and operations like that. But in any event, the comment simply is that you can actually begin to document the positive effects now in the accident data. My question, though, is this, that I think when you look at who's flying in the various countries, throughout those 5 or 6 countries that I track pretty carefully, you can see that personal flying has really collapsed in the past 5 or 6 years. And I guess I'd appreciate your comments on not just will GA survive, because I think it will for a lot of the reasons that folks just stated, but who do you think has disappeared from the system? I mean, the numbers are down like 20% across the board in country after country over the past 5 or 6 years. Who do you see dropping out of the system, at least temporarily?
Well, I think it gets back to the earlier question that we have. We have a aging pilot population, and we don't have the base funneling in at the student start level, and that's where I think the opportunity is, and that's why I think some of these programs to try to attract young people and make them aware of the opportunities are so critically important. I will just go back one comment that you made, because in some ways you talked about how the technology is trickling down in general aviation, and it's at the point where a lot of the technologies that we have today are actually commensurate with the commercial airlines. And I would simply say that is certainly the case in a lot of areas, but we're also seeing actually a trend where a lot of general aviation technologies are migrating upward. I think GPS was really adopted very rapidly within the general aviation community, in some cases in a handheld basis. Don't listen, Nick. But I think it's a good example of how what you see is the general aviation community and a strong focus on safety, and how that leads to a tremendous desire for any product which can help us with navigation, situational awareness, whatever it is.
I would just add that there is a reason why I think we, as all general aviation advocates, are so passionate against user fees. Because as Ed touched on earlier, we have seen the demise of general aviation in countries that have implemented user fees. When you fly in Europe and you are charged for every single landing you make, you stop making landings. And then pretty soon it's too expensive to even fly, and you're not going to mess with it. You're going to go on somewhere else. And that's why we are so adamant that we do not want to see that type of system imposed here in the U.S., because once we start feeding the monster through user fees, they'll just keep going up and our industry will go away. And there are a lot better ways to collect revenue, and we've been working very hard on that. So I think it's imperative for us to look at those lessons learned and see what we can do to restore general aviation in other parts of the world, and not to implement those where it hasn't already been implemented, and then try to refocus efforts on the places where user fees have been implemented and see if there's a better way to do it. Look at the environmental challenges we have ahead of us. If we go down the same route on the environmental challenges, we're going to kill aviation even further up the chain if we go and over-regulate and overburden the industry, especially with fees and charges that have a high administrative burden, as Ed talked about earlier.
Okay, I thought we had someone raise a hand here, right here.
I just wanted to comment about the user groups are trying to get GA together to band together from a safety program. As Mr. Yayoun had indicated, the Cirrus Owners and Pilots group, of which 2 of my employees are members, has been very active from an internet point of view, including those people in China. This group encourages its members to go through recurrent training, upset training, training for the use of the parachute system in the aircraft. And they're very effective in getting that point across to their membership, merely to reduce the insurance rates. As we remember that Corey Lytle lost his life, and the Cirrus Owners put out a mandate to that group and said, hey, we need to do something about this. 1, it's bad press, and 2, we're losing people, that it's unnecessary. So that's the one comment. As far as the economics of GA, In '83, we built 10,000 aircraft a year. Right now, at best, we'll build maybe 2,500 to 3,000 this year, and there's an economy of scale that happens. And we have some creep that happens in what goes on, because we supply components to Gulfstream for the 650, and we also supply to Cirrus on the SR-20. And the regulatory oversight is no different between those two aircraft. As amazing as that may sound, just the creep of what we're actually doing. It may sound strange to you, but the actual requirements, and I can show you, in fact, I could use Cessna as an example. I have an example of supporting a Cessna Columbus oxygen system, and I have the retrofit lights for the GA side, and the oversight and the requirements from a standpoint of regulatory information that Cessna wants to provide are equivalent. And my suggestion, in order to help that, is that we extend the ASTM regulations that were done for the LSA, to include aircraft up to, say, the 3,800-pound range, so that if an organization is qualified from a safety management system, and they have those pieces in place, that simply meeting a standard would take away, one, government oversight and additional people to monitor that, but also allow a lot more freedom in actually creating safer aircraft.
I appreciate your comment. I would like to go back to the issue you raised about recruiting and training and retaining pilots. The issue is larger than just pilots and mechanics. It's a little bit disconcerting that we in the United States are seeing just a trickle of people coming into the pipeline that feeds the aerospace industry in the United States. I don't know what the solution is. I don't think we're seeding the programs that can be seeded, and I don't know what those programs can be. But I think it's more of a societal issue. It's more than just, let's get out and get people to fly. That's a part of it. But the larger issue is that, and I see my friend from Embry-Riddle is here, and you can validate this for me. I can tell you that a significant percentage of the people who graduate who want to fly, who have a desire to fly, who have a romance with flying, are being spirited away by Disney. You can answer that question for yourself, why? And that's correct, isn't it? Yeah, so that is happening. The Pittsburgh Institute of Aeronautics in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, their percentage of students coming in for that kind of aviation training is down dramatically. So there is something going on in our society that is causing people to not be interested in aviation, despite some excellent efforts to encourage people to come in. And then, as I said, it's more than just pilots and mechanics. It's the engineers, it's designers, etc. And any other comments, gentlemen? Okay. Okay, we're coming up on 5 o'clock, not seeing any hands being raised.
Last comment?
Oh, please, yes.
If we're coming up on 5 o'clock and about to adjourn, I don't want the panel to come to an end without thanking, on behalf of the general aviation community, Nick Sabatini for all he's done to promote aviation safety in the United States and around the world, but particularly in the general aviation community. We talked a lot today about some of the technologies that are going into general aviation airplanes. And I recall when I first met Nick, the efforts that he made to make sure enhanced vision systems were something that could be realized. And his commitment to promoting the new technologies, to getting them into the cockpit, and also his focus on the systems. A lot of people don't realize Nick led the first government organization to ever be ISO certified. He has been a tremendous leader and a champion for safety, particularly general aviation safety. And so as we're closing this, and as Nick is preparing to retire from the FAA, I'd like to thank him on behalf of everyone at NBAA, and I know that Pete and everyone associated with general aviation feels the same way. So, Nick, thank you.
Thank you very much.